right now, let's talk specifically about what Suella Braverman is going to say in this speech today to NatCon with Steven Woolfe. He's director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity and joins us. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julie.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It is extraordinary. We've got a Home Secretary, and I'm going to agree with everything she's got to say on this. Who's saying it's not xenophobic to say that we don't want, mass levels of migration. We should get our targets down. If we keep importing just millions and millions of people every year, we're going to forget how to do things for ourselves and basically forget how to work, is how one of the headlines has put it, because we're just going, British people won't pick, vegetables, or they won't work in an Amazon warehouse. Oh, well, we'll have to import that labour. I mean, she's right, but why have we got a Home Secretary effectively railing against government policy of her own party?
Well, it is rather strange, and it is the weirdest thing that for the British public to actually understand how we've managed to have, since 2002, 20 years, Julia, a population that has risen by nearly 10 million. That's an average of 1 million a year when we're looking at this.
Can I clarify? So it's not nearly 10 million people who've come here, but it's millions who've come here, but then it's also their children as well.
It's their children, it's their dependents. I mean, we had 59 million in 2002 and now 68,900,000. So we're nearly that period of time. And when you talk about the pressures, as you've just done, on hospitals and schools, it is because we've got population rises. The head of Ofwat has warned that we're now around 4 billion litres of water short every day in this country. And that was based on a population figure of around 66 million.
Yeah.
So we are looking at huge infrastructure issues. We're looking at the problems around our public services and schools, hospitals, roads, and that is directly related to immigration. And so Suella Braverman is right to mention it, but yet she has been part of the government that has seen the largest rise in immigration in this country in its history.
Now, we're constantly told, but we have to bring people in because we've got a load of Brits who won't do that work. They won't go and pick fruit, even if they'll take the wages. And by the way, these are not low-paid jobs. They're back-breaking jobs, to be fair. A lot of us wouldn't want to do it. But my view is, if I was hungry enough, I'd do it. But they just won't turn up. They'll come for a couple of days, and they just won't turn up. And the farmers are saying, we haven't got a choice. We need to bring people in to do these jobs. A lot of the jobs, we've got a couple of million unemployed in this country. We've got about 5 million people who are claiming to be in some way unable to work. A lot of young people, able-bodied young people, not working. And yeah, I walk past in London every single day, shop after shop and cafe and sandwich and coffee chain, which has got a sign up saying, desperately seeking staff, and those wages are going up all the time. So is it not true that we do have a culture in this country where actually there are quite a lot of people who don't want to work, refuse to work and won't work?
Well, it's also a little bit more than that, Julie. If you look at the argument from business that we've not got enough people to fill our jobs, and how can they say that when we've had, as we say, nearly 10 million new people coming from abroad and their children being born in this country over the past 20 years? So the argument that we keep needing to have more people is kind of slightly nonsensical because we keep importing more people. And as you say, net migration this year will be 1 million people. Yeah. So that is one of the things that we need to consider. So the key arguments that they're raising raise other issues. The fact that we keep bringing more people in requires more food to be imported into our country, more goods to be imported to our country, more housing to be built. So it becomes quite a vicious circle that as you bring more people in, you require more services and jobs, and therefore you need more people to fill them. And
it's self-fulfilling. We're constantly told, though, that these people, they are an asset, that net migration is a boon to the economy, which doesn't make sense when, most of the people arriving, I'm sorry, they're not top heart surgeons and entrepreneurs. I'm sure there are some, of course there are, but by the way, we could actually train our own top heart surgeons because we've got a limit on the number of people who are allowed to train as doctors in this country, and then we go, we haven't got enough doctors for the NHS. Well, can anyone think of a solution that doesn't involve bringing in hundreds of thousands of people from other countries who have paid for their health workers to be trained? But also, if immigration was this amazing driving force for our economy, How come we've had virtually a stagnant economy and stagnant productivity for the last 20 years when we have had massive immigration? Because if immigration drives our economy, it's not doing a very good job of it.
Well, and therein lies one of the economic issues that we have to face between the Treasury and those of large corporates who love to promote themselves on the world stage as saying we've got an enormous GDP, which is solely driven by the fact that the more people you bring in increases growth. But then you look at GNP, which is the actual wealth of the British people, is either stagnant or declining at different periods of the last 20 years. And that shows the real wealth, in my view, that mass migration, just all it does is keep a low-wage economy going. And that is what Tony Benn argued in 1980, that Britain only wants to be a low-wage economy. So you look at some of the facts that we have. 27 to 28% of our public servants, those who are in the administration, i.e. the blob, is now partly by those who are non-UK citizens. Distribution, hotels and restaurants are all about the same number, 28%. And that is because we failed to increase wages, increase technology, increase production in our country, and we've relied on low wages. And we'll continue to do so. And all that will do is drive this economy down and make us less effective to other countries that are growing across the globe.
And this is the thing, and you mentioned GDP and GNP. I think one of the crucial things is they often say, oh, GDP per capita is going up. It's brilliant. Like, well, but the thing is, you have more people, but it depends how it's shared out, isn't it? And we have this battle over, during Brexit of this idea, well, but mass immigration was really good. Well, it might be really good if you're running a business and you can hire people on minimum wage and just more and more people turning up and they'll live, Romanians or Poles, and they'll live, 3 to a room and then send the money back home. Well, that's fine, but that's not how people who want to live here, and actually also how people who are settled here from Eastern Europe or any other country eventually do want to live here when they settle down here. And you're just in a situation where we are subsidising through housing benefit and working tax credit and child benefit people living in this country on basically wages which are not livable. And quite apart from the housing issue, it seems to me that one of the big political issues that is really developing and people are finally getting to grips with is that we're not facing a world population explosion. We're facing a world population, implosion. And actually, in 50 years' time, we're going to be desperately seeking younger people. But why does the government think the solution is to import those from abroad who may not necessarily share our language, our values, our culture, and able to assimilate easily into this country? When we've got millions of people in this country who would love to be having more kids, but they can't afford to because they can't get on the housing ladder. They've got student debt. They can't. Their wages don't stretch to anyone taking maternity or paternity leave for 6 months or even just a few months. The solution is really simple, isn't it? Make it easier for people here, already here, and by the way, of every colour and hue and religion, to have children that they want already to have, rather than importing people from abroad. It doesn't even make sense what their policy is at the moment.
Well, their policy is just about growth through people. And there is a spiral that comes with this, and economics will actually show you that too, that if you now have 68 to nearly 69 million people in this country, then many of them are going to grow older and for longer. And so in the future, another 20 years, what's the population got to be if you need to have younger people looking after them? 75, 76 million? And these are the kind of graphs that you see. So the reality of government should be asking ourselves, we are now building more houses than we ever have done, 165,000 a year generally. That is huge numbers. Yet we've still got a housing crisis and a housing shortage.
We need to build like 350,000 just to keep pace with where we're moving now, let alone for all the ones that are missing already. I mean, it's quite absurd, isn't it? Stephen, just to break one moment, just breaking news, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he's been in Paris meeting Emmanuel Macron, but we've just announced that he's due to meet Rishi Sunak in London today for what he's called substantive negotiations, face-to-face talks. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. Just one final thing I want to talk to you about, Stephen, and this is the issue of EU citizens, whether or not they should have the vote. We understand that Labour, there's been a bit of backtracking over the weekend, but they are looking at the biggest increase in the franchise in a century, allowing EU citizens who have settled in Britain to get a say in general and local elections in this country, also lowering the voting age to 16 and 17, which I think is absurd in itself, but allowing, 2 or 3 million EU citizens who've lived here a long time, not just somebody who's just turned up here, but somebody who's been, got settled status, to vote in our elections. What do you make of that plan?
Well, I think it's a plan to allow 6.2 million people who currently come under the EU settlement scheme post-Brexit and have a right to have the vote, in the belief that they can prepare themselves for a return to the European Union. And that is the stated policy of many within the Labour Party. It's certainly part of the Liberal Democrats Party manifesto. And if there's going to be a deal between Labour and the Liberal Democrats, I think it's the EU issue as well as voting reform. And all the Labour Party is doing is preparing that. But we've seen that with the Conservative Party's and Kemi Badenoch's decision not to remove EU laws. We've seen the fact that the Northern Ireland Protocol is not as strong for the Northern Irish people as it should be and keeps ourselves separated. There is this trajectory and movement to ensure that Brexit was just a one-off, and this is just another movement towards that, I believe. Yeah,
it is quite bizarre, the idea that people who aren't citizens of this country should be allowed to vote in our general election. But, a British citizen living in an EU country wouldn't be entitled to vote in their general elections or presidential elections. It's quite bizarre. But also, Sam Armstrong from the Free Speech Union, who's joining us this morning, pointed out, interesting that only EU citizens. Why not citizens of India? Why not the citizens of Nigeria or Australia or America? Why particularly EU citizens?
Well, that is because I believe it's aimed towards the EU referendum, but it's also quite racist, isn't it, really? If you turn around and say that my Irish grandparents could have voted here, but those who came from America or Africa could not, then that would seem to me entirely unfair, as I would say. And if you're therefore going to allow everybody to vote from the EU, then why not allow the 206 countries that have applied for asylum over the last 20 years also have the vote as well? Absolutely. So it strikes me as being something that is discriminatory.
It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it, how this is all developing. Steven Woolfe, always so good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us.